everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Keeping It Real. In this one, we're going to be talking about the gift of emotions. In the previous episodes, you've heard Aarti mention something very, very often, which is there is no such thing as a negative emotion. All emotions are positive. That's what she said. Okay, and obediently, all of us nodded our heads. Yeah, and I'm sure many of you nodded your heads. And let me be very, very honest. Even though I nodded my head, I myself know that there are only some emotions that I highlight. Some emotions I hide. Sometimes some emotions I don't even acknowledge. And which is rather unfortunate, because actually every emotion has some purpose or the other. And by either hiding it or not acknowledging it, what we are doing is we are failing to maximize the potential of that purpose. So which is why we wanted to do this episode. We wanted to take a deep dive into emotions. What do they mean? How do we understand them? And what are the gifts they bring us? And so Aarti, if only we were able to do this, be able to acknowledge and understand our emotions, it would be great. But obviously there is something else going on. There is something that distorts our thinking or our perception. Why do we choose to highlight some emotions and why do we choose to hide some?
We'll need to understand right from our upbringing. How we learn emotion is first determined by our attachment patterns with our parents. So if I have a secure bonding, secure attachment with my primary caregivers, I process emotions very differently from somebody who's not had that security. But what really shapes emotion over a period of time is our thinking pattern. And this is where there are a lot of thinking distortions that affect the way we process and perceive emotions, starting with polarization. Somewhere I'm made to believe that some things are good, some things are bad. So it becomes a very black and white kind of thinking. So for example, when something happens, like this is a good thing that happened, this is a bad thing that happened. So I've already put them in compartments. And when I start seeing adults around me doing the good and the bad, this and that, black and white, I think emotions also have to fit into those categories. That's the first distortion. The second one is overgeneralization, which is I take one incident or one event and I generalize for a whole the whole of my life. So, I jump to conclusions about something. So, somebody hurts me and I say, everybody is like that. And then I decide that this entire community is going to be this way, this entire gender is going to be this way. This generalization also diminishes my ability to acknowledge and experience certain emotions. The third area or the third distortion is catastrophizing. So what happens is I take the worst case scenario for everything. So something happens, I'm ashamed about something that happened in school or at home, and I take the worst case scenario, nobody will love me. And I then decide that I shouldn't feel shame, for example. That's another thing. The fourth is personalization. Everything happens only, and that personalization is a very dangerous way of processing emotion. You would have seen very young children saying, I told the rain to stop and it stopped. It's almost like that. When we can laugh about that, we need to understand emotions are also like that. Because I did this, that person left me. We need to understand we can't personalize every situation, every emotion. The next one, even more dangerous, mind reading. Where it's not empathy. Empathy is different, where I really understand from a perspective of wanting to understand you. Mind reading is, on the other hand, is where I attribute something, thinking that you are feeling this. I said this, so this person is thinking this, and therefore this is how they will be feeling.
Or from the way he looks at me itself, I know what he is thinking.
Exactly. And mind reading is a very dangerous distortion of emotion, because, whenever I mind read, it's going to be for the negative. For an incident that is going to create pain or harm or something like that. It's never mind reading. Or sometimes it can even be a delusional, I think that person really likes me. That person would have just smiled, So this mind reading again distorts, and then it leads to disappointment and all of these things. The next is mental filtering and discounting. And that's again very dangerous, because I start filtering and seeing only what I want to see in the situation. So some incident happens and I filter it and say only this should happen. So, I should think only good things is also a form of mental filtering. When you start doing that, you're saying that some things are not good, and the wholesomeness of life is disturbed because of that. The next is should statements. Life should be like this, I should be like that, I should do this, I ought to do this. So when I do the shoulds, what I'm doing is I'm setting these rules and not going with the flow, and that distorts thoughts and emotions very greatly. The 4 fallacies that I wanted to talk about are control. I must be in control, I must be always in control, and if I'm not in control, I'll blame somebody else. So if something goes wrong, I'll blame you for it. The second fallacy is where others must change for me.
Oh yes.
I know you are wrong, so you must change.
You must change
for me. And
Yes.
if other people don't change, the world is a bad place.
Yeah.
The only thing that you have control over is your choices, right? And if you give away that, and you expect other people to change, you're actually making for life to become more complex for you. The next fallacy is life is fair. Life is going to be extremely unfair. Okay, it's going to deal out cards you cannot play, and you still have to figure out, I'm holding these cards and this is how I'm going to be playing it.
It's like that saying, life is unfair, get over it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Get over it. The next one is the heaven's reward fallacy, I call it, which means I've been self-sacrificing all my life. I've always given, I've always been this person. So you must reward me. You must do good things for me. Life must be kind to me. Please, if you have these fallacies, they're going to distort your emotions. And we are laughing because, we've gone through these phases.
Exactly.
And, every episode, both Anu and I keep telling you, we've gone through this. We've made these mistakes.
Yeah.
And we sort of realized that, it's possible for all of us to be in these traps at some point, thinking traps, as I would call them. The next is emotional reasoning. The most dangerous as far as I'm concerned. My emotions are attributed to be the most reliable indicator of reality. I am feeling this, so it must be true.
Sorry, I burst out laughing because I have done that. And I said, I am feeling very depressed and sad, which means something bad is going to happen.
Going to happen. Exactly what emotional reasoning is, and that's another very dangerous way. And some people start prophesying from this. We give so much weightage to something that could be so unreliable. We have to realize that emotions change, thoughts change. They are not absolute structures that you can build something upon. They were okay for that moment, but you can't decide everything for the rest of your right. And the next one is labeling, reducing yourself to a label. I'm a failure, and the one I share with you, I'm spiritual. Okay. Okay, I don't know why you're laughing.
And we stop there.
Yeah, I will stop there because it's treading on dangerous territory, right? So, anyway, once you reduce yourself to a label, you don't allow yourself to feel certain things.
I'd love to share a label which other people gave me, and I accepted it and made it my own. I am tough. That means it locks me into a trap of my own making, which means I can't exhibit my vulnerability to anyone. I have to be tough, so it stops me from reaching out for help when I need it most.
Exactly. And that's where, I am spiritual thing which we laughed about, it made me think that I shouldn't feel angry, I shouldn't feel jealous. As a human being, I should feel angry, I should feel jealous, and I should understand what to do about it. But the moment I put the spiritual tag, I didn't want to feel it. And then the moment I removed that label, I was able to lead a more wholesome life, and that was probably more spiritual than actually the label that I had given myself. And the last distortion is stereotypes. Looking at things through stereotyping. A gender has to be this way, a particular kind of person has to be this way. Initially, I would burn myself out because stereotypically we are helpers. Okay? And then I realized if you really need to help, you need to have boundaries. You have to also be able to say no. Yeah. So as a psychologist, one of my the stereotypes in my head was that we are helpers. So we must always be available for people. And then I realized that people were taking me for granted all the time, expecting me to be there, like sometimes at midnight for something non-essential. Like, the child is not listening to me or something like that, which can be spoken during the day. And that's when I set very strict boundaries. And then I realized that it was much easier when I was not looking at the stereotype that was driving me to work.
Yes.
So having said this, I need us to understand that many of us, because of our early experiences and modeling of these patterns from the people around us, we tend to give more weightage to certain thoughts and certain emotions, and sort of put these certain thoughts and emotions in certain containers where they don't belong. And that's what we need to sort of start looking at.
So when you were talking about these thought distortions, and which kind of end up in us assuming certain things and attributing certain qualities to emotions, it kind of confuses us as well, right? But emotions actually have a role to play. So how do we look at that?
Emotions evolved over a period of time, and they are, at the first basic level, they are quick information processors. Now imagine, for every situation, if I have to take all the possible inputs and then try and process it and act, some of the things in life I will not be able to handle at all. So they evolved over a period of time as quick information processors. And also, emotions prepare us for immediate action. Emotions are required in many situations for immediate action, because they prevent us from going into complex thought experiences for every experience.
I can give an example, because I'm sitting inside this room, right? And then I hear a noise outside and I go to the door. If I hear a growl, the emotion I feel is fear. So don't open the door. So fear is actually an emotion which actually processes the information and then guides my action.
In an instant,
Yes.
It just took that one aspect, and that's one of the major roles of emotion. The third area is where emotions influence our thoughts, our survival, and our understanding. Because when I'm in a relationship, for example, my survival in the relationship, my understanding of the other person, what I'm thinking, are very deeply dependent on what I'm feeling, the emotions I'm feeling. The second, emotions motivate future behaviors. What I'm feeling will always decide what I'm going to be doing next about something. Then, more important, it enhances our interpersonal experiences. So if it's a friendship, if it's a business partnership, if it's anything that we are in an intimate partner relationship, the quality of the emotions that I feel will determine how qualitative or how beautiful that relationship can be.
Yeah, for this an example would be compassion, isn't it? Because when you are in a relationship and a friendship, whatever it is, when you have compassion for the other person, then it determines how you perceive that person, how you perceive the equation, how you're going to act, and how you also perceive the whole experience.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yes. And so emotions have that function. And more recently, there has been a lot of research into peptides inside the body, which are like proteins inside the body. And we've found a lot of correlation between our immune system, the functioning of the immune system, and emotions. So when I don't feel emotions and I suppress emotions, when I repress emotions, it does directly have an impact on our immune system as well. In fact, the study has quoted a lot of research around monocytes, and it's very important for us to understand the quality of our emotions also impact our immune system. So let me move into a very important aspect of emotions, because we always think emotions are only feelings, and we equate emotions and feelings, and then we forget that they can be more. Emotions always will have three components, and when we suppress or repress emotions, we are suppressing and repressing all three, and which is why it's dangerous. The first aspect of emotions are always physiological. So when I feel fear, for example, you feel like a raised heartbeat, you're sometimes sweating, you start feeling a lot of tension in the extremities, because you need to either have that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. And in fact, when you feel love, for that matter, you feel very happy inside the heart, and you feel all like, I know the exact word, but the physiological response to love is very beautiful. And then when you feel anxiety, the butterflies in the stomach, that's a physiological response to it. And when you feel sad, for example, many people experience feeling very cold. They say, when I was feeling very cold, and in fact, if you look at popular literature, poetry especially, you will see emotions always equated to the physiological aspects of it. He was hot with rage, things like that. So, those kind of things. The second aspect of emotions are the subjective aspect. What am I experiencing as a result? So when I'm feeling joyful, I'm also feeling very light, and that subjectivity of joy is very, very in all parts of my body. When I'm feeling angry, I'm almost like tight-fisted. I want tight-fisted, not in the sense of holding back money, but I'm ready to throw a punch.
I feel the tension of the anger in my jaw.
The body takes on the physiological part, those things are there, and then you have the subjective experience of what I'm really feeling, and then the third aspect, which is how am I going to express it? Because the emotion that I'm feeling, the subjective experience will be a combination of feelings and thoughts, and then they will lead to how am I going to express it? So when some of us will cry, some of us will punch, some of us will just shrink, many ways in which we express emotion. So it's important for us to understand that all three aspects are what we call emotion. It's not just one. So when we suppress the whole thing, and which is why it's very, very dangerous.
So when we understand that there are three aspects to the emotion, it's not just one small thing which we can encompass into just feeling, then that kind of widens my understanding of this whole thing. We start off this saying that every emotion has a purpose, right? And every emotion brings with it gifts. So let's just look at some of them. Let's take my favorite emotion, anger.
Anger is my favorite as well. It's one of my most beautiful emotions. Why? Because anger, it can also be, many people when we tell them that anger and all that, they say no, I don't feel angry. Anger can come in different forms. Anger can be resentment also. And when I say resentment, somebody else in the office gets a promotion that's supposed to come to me. I'm not feeling angry, but I'm feeling resentful. Okay. Another way anger comes out is irritability. Don't do that, I told you, and that's anger in another form. The third way in which anger comes up is frustration. I've built anger over a period of time, and I'm just like, nothing in life is working. That is also from anger. So it can take different shades based on how it was welcomed at home. Like, many times girls are told you're not supposed to feel angry. Good girls don't feel angry. And many people who feel anger actually turn it inwards and make it sadness. And that's why they'll say, when I get very angry, I start crying. So I want us to understand, anger is a very beautiful change emotion. It helps us, it brings into our life the ability to change. So whenever you're feeling angry, the question you have to ask yourself, what would I like to change in my life?
It does, because of late, I've been experiencing a lot of this, in the sense I've been experiencing other people's anger, right? Because the moment your voice becomes a little louder, then obviously, then the fact that you are talking about things that are different, things that other people don't perceive as important, or the fact that you are not talking about things that are important to them, all of this seems to be generating anger in a lot of people, right? In the early days when I started being active on social media, their anger triggered my anger, right? And I would want to immediately hit back. That used to start. Then I realized, okay, it's not about me, it's about them. And what I'm realizing is, it has taught me to be assertive now. When people abuse and are negative online, I'm assertive, I'm firm. I tell them, this is not on. What you're saying is actually saying this about you. So this is not on. I do not accept this kind of behavior. If you continue talking, negatively, and you start abusing, I will remove you from the page. So the moment you do that, there are 2 or 3 things that happen which are beautiful. One, which I think is the most amazing change that it brings about, is I have seen in about 60% of the cases, the abuser actually calms down and they change their tone. So I've brought about a change in their approach. It doesn't always happen, but when it happens, I think it's fabulous. Secondly, it also makes me understand that this is a good way of dealing with anger without making it feel unpleasant. And the third that it does is it sets an example of behavior. It sets an example for other people. So then there are two examples here, how not to be and how to be. Both those examples.
Yes.
And if you look at the page, I am so gratified that the lessons that I have learnt in this has actually had its effect on the page. And you look at the page, there is a lot of pleasant, positive people who are there. There are differences of opinion which are voiced very nicely. It's not abusive or negative. And also people are standing up against other people's negative behavior, even if it was not directed at them.
Beautiful. And you brought all the three gifts of anger. The first being assertiveness, where you protect yourself, and at the same time you don't become passive, but you let them know this is what I expect and this is how it has to be done.
Yeah.
The second, which is strength, it gives you and other people more strength. It makes you more powerful.
Yeah.
And the third most important is that it brings about the kind of energy required for change. And that's why anger comes in. And it's a beautiful emotion, one of my favorites.
Okay, what is the next
So
emotion that we shall look at?
I think we should talk about shame, because it's one of those states that people shy away from. Because shame itself is only in secrecy. It is something that has power only when it's secretive. And shame can come up as embarrassment. It can come up as desire as well. When I desire something that is not acceptable, that can also be a form of shame.
Yes.
And that's why a lot of sexual abuse, the predators, I don't want to call them perpetrators, I call them predators, because sexual abuse especially, because it's a crime of power and not so much of sexuality. In that, especially if it is child sexual abuse or if it's incest, what I find is that the predator always keeps shame as the primary source of keeping the victim silent. You also enjoyed it. That's why I did it. And
you were
the
also
person
part
feels so
of it.
Shameful, part of it. Shame has power in secrecy, unlike other emotions. Like anger and all has no power in secrecy, but shame is always in the secret aspect that the person sort of keeps it. When someone has not come out, someone has hidden some information, shame is usually there, and that's why it comes out as embarrassment. And what it teaches us is humility in some situations. And that's when arrogance, like when you arrogantly do something, then it leads to humility. So when I jumped at a particular situation, somebody was trying to tell me something and I refuted it with very little information, not having the truth. I'm sure you have
been there, done that.
Done that. Excellent.
The example I'd like to share, and I was so embarrassed and shameful I am now because of what happened. Early days of COVID, right? At that time, we didn't know very much about it. We just knew that it's transmitted through the air. That's what they said. Nobody knew anything. I was in a public event and there was a doctor who was there. And the way she spoke was probably what raised my hackles. But that should not have made me blind to what she said. What she said was, I am a doctor. This is a virus. I don't believe shaking hands is good. So I'm not going to shake your hand. I'm going to do namaste. So, my infinite arrogance, because we have read WHO site, we know everything there is about them. At that time, they didn't even declare it to be a pandemic, but we have read up about it. So, in my arrogance, I tell her that yes, they are saying it's transmitted through the air, but if you don't want to shake hands, that's fine. Namaste. Now, by itself, the words are not conveying anything else, but that underlying arrogance, see, whether it is expressed explicitly or not, I have to admit that I displayed an arrogance that was unwarranted. Because fast forward several months, what are they saying? No shaking hands.
Don't shake hands. Yeah.
And so I am saying it taught me humility. It taught me the fact that, listen, don't be arrogant that you know. Just because you've read up a couple of sites, don't think you know everything about it, because even there are lots of information that is still being discovered about it. So it taught me humility.
Exactly. So one gift of shame is humility when it comes from a space of arrogance. And when you've been the wronged person or the victim of some situation, then it teaches us humanity. It teaches us that we are not alone. That some of these things that we go through, especially when we've been victimized or abused, that we are not alone, and that many have suffered, and that, in this common thread of humanity, we can find our solace and our strength. And that's one of the things that shame brings as a gift. And it's very beautiful when we understand humility and both humanity as well. Right? Want to do another emotion?
Yeah. Yes, let's do another one.
We should.
Which one?
We'll take fear, because it's one of the most common. It's a very protective, beautiful emotion. So I won't ever say don't feel afraid, but it's coming to communicate, find out what you have to do about it. So fear can come even as feeling overwhelmed. A lot of people say, no, I never feel scared, I'm very brave and all that. You may be brave, but you can be feeling overwhelmed. That's also from fear. Right? Another thing that happens is feeling threatened. Like somebody tells you something and you feel very threatened about it, threatened about somebody's success, threatened. That's also from fear. You're not jealous there, but you're feeling threatened. That person became more successful, I'm feeling threatened by that. That's also from fear. And another thing is apprehension. I'm so doubtful. I'm always wondering, should I do this? Should I not do this? I'm always having these mental battles inside my head. That's also from fear. And I'm sure many people will resonate with this one emotion, because we all go through these phases. Fear brings with it beautiful gifts. One is wisdom, because it brings very genuine insight into what can be done, what cannot be done, what is good, what is not okay, and all of that. It gives us very deep-seated protection, because if I listen to the fear, many times it gives me protection. And the third is it sort of furthers the sense of preservation that we need as a species. Without fear, now for example, if I did not fear the virus to a certain extent, I'll be arrogant, I won't wear a mask, I'll go out infecting people. But this sense of fear that I have also brings in the sense of responsibility that I need, and that is from the sense of preservation. I need to preserve my species. I need to protect myself. And that's very important for us to understand. The ones that don't have fears are the ones that are going out, without the pass and breaking rules and all of those things, because they don't experience it from that sense of responsibility. Right? And the gift of fear is that wisdom that I can do something about COVID situation right now, and that can be staying safe.
Yeah, and I also wanted to share this. So I don't know whether you can see this, not the end. This is a beautiful book that was gifted to me by a wonderful, wonderful friend of mine, Yaz and Venk, both of them. So this is a book that has been written very long ago, and you know this book, but I'm telling the audience for this. It's a book about how we all want to find our freedom and how fear holds us back from experiencing the full potential of life. And in that book, there is a dragon called the Dragon of Fear. And the Dragon of Fear actually is afraid. He's not the Dragon of Fear who's there to make you fearful. He is fearful. So you need to protect it. You need to keep it safe. And ultimately, when the princess runs, Dragon of Fear, out of fear, holds her and stops her. And she stops herself from falling over a cliff.
Wow.
So it's actually how fear protects you. And actually, fear is afraid, but it protects you. It's a beautiful.
So I'm glad we could talk about fear in the light that it needs to be seen, and not, from the thing of, in Tamil always they'll say, bayapadadinga. Bayapadlam. You can feel afraid, but you need to know what it's telling you and how the gifts need to be accessed, and that's really more important.
Comes back to the definition of what is courage, right? Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is acting despite the fear.
Knowing that it has gifts for us. And I'll go to pain, the next emotion. Pain is actually our ability to connect with love. I think we did an entire episode on the broken heart, where we talked about sadness, we talked about hurt, we talked about pity, and these are the ways in which pain is expressed. And what does pain bring as a gift? It brings healing, of patterns that we've not dealt with. Second, it brings growth of ourselves, of skills, of resources, and most important, it brings awareness to our life, because if there was no pain in our life, we would not be aware of what needs change for us to be a better version of ourselves. So pain is a very important state, and I at one point, I spent a lot of my younger years trying to avoid pain, and then when I realized that you embrace pain, you become more aware, then it became so much more beautiful.
I also feel pain teaches us compassion.
Of course. And I'm so glad you brought it up. I think I should add that as one of the gifts of pain as well. Yes, teaches us compassion and empathy as well.
Yes.
I think those are states that pain brings us. I'll talk about the next two, which is jealousy and envy. Okay, and jealousy and jealousy and envy, they're my favorite emotions, because most people I've spoken to will say, no, I never feel jealous. Because when we are taught as children jealousy is bad, we pick it up like shouldn't feel jealous. So we don't show jealousy externally, overtly. But how jealousy manifests? As competition. Jealousy manifests as gossiping. Jealousy manifests as discounting other people's achievements. Jealousy manifests as backbiting. When I talk behind a person's back, it's always from jealousy. It cannot be from any other emotion. And I love jealousy and envy for the single reason that they are self-love emotions. Why does jealousy come to us? It comes to us saying, listen, didn't you have these goals for yourself? And somebody else is reaching them. Why are you not prioritizing your goals? Get on with it. Start. It's time for you to achieve. And it reminds us that we've been, focusing on things that are not important in our life when we should be doing the things that make us happy. So for me, jealousy and envy come in when we do not prioritize ourselves or our goals and we are distracted. And it says, please, let's not waste life like this. Let's start focusing. So when you feel jealous, instead of gossiping, pulling someone down, see how you can prioritize what you need to be doing. And that's why I say it's a beautiful emotion. And then, of course, love. Love is that state, that all-encompassing state, and it's gentleness, compassion, it's affection, and it brings trust, it brings connection, it brings security, and it brings life. And we've done an entire episode on it as well, so which is why I'm not going into it much deeper. Guilt. This is another state that people don't like to talk about. Guilt can be shown as regret or remorse. Okay, and it's usually because it comes from a state of love. It's somebody that I really like or love or respect, and I do something that hurts them or causes them pain, and that's when guilt comes in. And guilt has a very beautiful set of gifts. One, it gives us the opportunity to make amends. It brings our awareness to how can I change life, how can I make this better. Okay, and the second thing, it helps us re-examine our values and bring in a better understanding of what we stand for. And that's why I love guilt, because I can give you a small example here. When I was going through a difficult phase, I was very, very difficult to reach. Clients were trying to reach me and they were not able to do it. And at that point, I felt guilty that I was not helping them, but I was also not in a state where I could work. So I quickly worked on myself, and then I made amends. I called back every person who had left me a message saying, I'm so sorry I was unreachable, but I'd like to see you now. And then, it built a beautiful relationship between me and the client. And then they also understood that, I'm vulnerable as them, and I needed time. And I did tell them where it came from. But that guilt was the one that helped me understand how to make amends. And you had an example as well, right?
Yeah, mine is a very, probably many people might think it is silly, but it made a big impact on me. So I was meeting this friend of mine for breakfast, and I was running late by about 5-10 minutes, and I'm someone who hates to be late. So I'd already messaged him saying that, hey, I'm so sorry I'm 10 minutes late, but I was still feeling terrible about it, and I rushed into the restaurant. I have no eyes for anything except him. Where is he? Oh, he's sitting there. Oh, hi Abe, I'm sorry I'm late. I come in and sit, and as I sit down, my phone rings, right? I look at the phone. It's a very dear friend of mine, whom you actually know him. We used to work out with him in YMCA, Mr. R.
Yeah.
So calling me on my phone. Now what happened was, I'm already late. I'm feeling terrible that I'm late. I don't want to take this call and delay it further. So I said, I'll take this later. I said, and I disconnect the call. And I turned to the right. Mr. R is sitting on the table to the right. I felt so terrible, because I immediately felt, what would he have thought? He can see me saying, I'm not taking the call now. He would have felt so bad. I'm so fond of him and his wife. Both of them are there, and they're sitting with another friend as well. And I felt so terrible. But thankfully, I had the presence of mind to get up and immediately go to the table. And I said, Abe, sorry, 1 minute, because I knew this is more important. I went up and said, I'm so sorry. I was so late. I was so stressed. That's why I didn't, pick up your call. Even now, when I think about it, it makes me feel guilty. But now I have brought about I've made one change, which is, if I am going for a meeting, I put my phone on silent. So that's the change it brought about. But I think your example is more beautiful because it kind of builds a connect between you as a therapist, you as a person, and the people who come to you for help.
Exactly, and no emotion is better or worse, or all of that, but it just gives us that opportunity to be more human, and that's exactly where I'm coming from, which is why I'm going to lead to the next emotion, which is joy. Joy is like that beautiful state. It can come up as feeling elated, feeling hopeful, and also feeling happy. It can be expressed in all of this, and the gifts that it brings is abundance, again a form of growth, and a lot of happiness. Okay, and I have a beautiful example. I know it happened just 2-3 days back, so I have to say it. And how the lockdown has affected all of us. So I have a nephew. He's 17 and he had to take an entrance exam in Bangalore. So from Salem to Bangalore, we had to apply for all these passes. The government was very supportive. In fact, in the collector's office, they were very supportive. They told us because it's an exam, it's okay. And they gave us the e-pass. We had several procedures to go through. There was checking every 50 kilometers, all of that. So it's quite a stressful thing. And only me and him, I'm driving him into another state. And we're worried, if we get there, institutional quarantine, everybody has frightened us with these stories. We finished the exam. He finished early. So we decided to leave the state as early as possible to come into Tamil Nadu, so that once we come here, we'll deal with it. So we're crossing Krishnagiri or something, and there's a police checkpost, and everybody's reading about police atrocity and all that, and so we're also a little worried, because they're like very strict looking person. So he came and then he made us roll down the glasses, and then he asked my nephew where he had gone and all of that, and he immediately took out his hall ticket and he said, I went for an entrance exam. And then he said, okay, what time did you leave Salem? What time did you cross the toll? What time did you enter Bangalore? He had all these questions, and we had answers when we had proof with our pass. And then he just stopped all that interrogation and he said, Thambi, nalla eludiningla, did you write well? And I hope you get into the university. At that point, I experienced joy because it came from hope. In all of this is a man who's been standing out in the sun checking vehicles for probably 3 months. And even in spite of that, for a moment, he looked at a young boy who has an entire life and he's probably anxious. And from a space of beautiful joy and hope, he asked him if he had done well and that he should get into the university. And I think that preciousness that it brought can come only from joy, because it comes from deep hope.
And this is the second time I'm hearing it, and it still moves me as much as it did the first time, because the beauty just doesn't fade. My God, we discount the importance of these small gestures and the way that they can impact us and give us such hope and joy. No?
Yes. And the first thing my nephew did when he came back home, he went to his mom and he said, did she tell you about the police officer? And this had happened 2 hours before. But still, in his mind and in my heart, the one thing that stood out was this person, and from that joy that we experienced because of his kindness. And I think that was probably such a beautiful thing that I wanted to share, and I hope this story is something that inspires other people as well, because those small things bring great joy for other people. And the hope that he brought into our life that day, in spite of being so tired and exhausted in the sun, I think it was something very, very beautiful.
It is.
Very, very beautiful.
It's gorgeous. There's a completely different thing that I would like to share. And I think both of us have a similar experience with this subject.
Resonate with that completely.
Yeah. Because, when we started out in life, we had these very clear-cut ideas about what we should have in life. And they weren't shaped by anything except of what we had seen in other people's lives and what we were told. So one of the things that I wanted was I wanted to have children. Right? When I was in my early 20s, I was very sure I want to be a mum. I want to have kids. But then life went on its path, and that didn't happen. Right? When that didn't happen, initially there was a bit of, I don't have children. But then when I looked deeper, I said, what is the emotion I feel when I have children? When anyone has children? It's that feeling of nurturing, right? Loving someone who's vulnerable, taking care of someone who's vulnerable. And I discovered the same thing, the same experience when I did that for older people. The same joy. So from a place of lack, I moved to a place of abundance, because You know, the statement they say about old people, they need so little, but they need it so much, right?
Yes.
You know, and when we are
Yes.
able to give that, the joy and the love that I feel when I do that for them, it gives me, I think it is the same kind of joy that I would have felt if I had had children.
I remember at one point when things weren't working out, I even told my dad, I think I should just be a single mom and adopt a child. You know, I even put in my papers for adoption, and it didn't come through in the way, because the child I wanted to adopt was very critically ill, and she passed away before I could adopt her. So I knew that, you know, this was not happening. And then I remember telling my dad, you know, it's not happening the way I wanted it to happen. And then I looked around and I was like, oh my God, I've been blinded all this while, because I'm working with children, day in and day out, working with children. I have 7,500 children after the tsunami I'm still taking care of. I'm taking care of so many children. What will it change? I'm so abundant in the space of children. And that's where, you know, the whole aspect of, you know, when we start defining happiness with our limited parameters, we miss out that larger picture of abundance that's possible. And that's where I'd like for all of you who are joining us to also look at how have you defined and how have you diminished some of the aspects of yourself. In the pursuit of happiness, did you forget to be happy? You know, and that's probably what Anu and I want to talk about. And you know, now there's no regret. In fact, there's so much joy in what we're able to do. And the last emotion or the last state is loneliness, and I think it's very important for us to speak about it right now. You know, and in fact, I think some of the doctors had spoken to you about how patients have been feeling very lonely during the COVID crisis and things like that. Loneliness is not because we feel nobody is around us. It's because we're not able to connect to the reality of what we have. Right? So it can come as isolation, and it comes as a conscious choice when it's isolation, where I've had bad experiences in relationships, so I decide I'm not going to ever be with people. People will always hurt me. That's one form of loneliness. The second is independence, where I become so super achieving and independent that I don't want anybody. And then it becomes lonely on top, because, you know, I've reached that space of independence and then I feel lonely. The third is where I feel remote. I feel distanced from other people. So all three are very, very difficult states for people who haven't understood why loneliness comes in. And the gifts that loneliness brings, the first is it teaches us to reach out. It says, you isolated yourself, now come out of that shell. It's time for you to open up and reach out. The second, it teaches the quality of interdependence. It teaches us that none of us is actually alone, that we are actually interdependent, and we can help each other through this journey. And a lot of students especially, you know, reached out saying, ma'am, I'm not able to meet my friends. I feel really upset. And I tell them, you know, we use technology for so many things. Why not start working? And you know, one of the sweetest things that happened, we have this 1993 is when we did 10th standard. 1993, the backbenchers, the ones that were always punished, you know, we were the backbenchers. We have a group, and so we did like a Zoom call, and we also took 2 or 3 of the first rankers. We wanted to let them know how much fun we had in class. And believe me, it was like one of the most hilarious Zoom calls I've done, because, you know, the backbenchers and the obnoxious life that we lived in the last row, we shared with the people who had missed out on all of this fun. And it was probably the most beautiful way of reaching out.
Use of technology to be able to connect. We feel the impact of loneliness even more now, because it's been imposed upon us. It's not by choice. It also makes people feel that they can't celebrate things that are worth celebrating. For example, a birthday. So you know what a friend of mine did? So when I joined university, when I joined BITS Pilani, the basketball captain, his birthday was coming up. She organized a Zoom call, and over 30 to 40 people joined in from all over the world. It kind of showed how we just have to reach out and we can still be connected.
By the way, your birthday is coming up. We'll do something, huh? It's like those kids in the car. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Anu's 50th birthday is
Countdown.
And the countdown. And the last gift of loneliness is solitude.
Yes.
The ability to understand I am enough. That I come as a whole, I'm complete, and I'm enough. And when I acknowledge that, loneliness transforms into one of the most enriching experience of being human. I hope the gifts are something that everybody is able to identify in your own lives.
And now I am very excited because see, now that we know all the roles that emotions play, and now that we know what gifts emotions bring, I am hoping that life will now become that much more easier for all of us.
I wish it was that easy.
There you
And
go.
I'm laughing.
There you
I
go.
know.
Very good.
Because
Oh.
I have to burst that bubble right now. Because as human beings, because we are never made emotionally aware as children, we are never actually taught the whole gamut of emotions, we become very familiar with anger, with sadness and all few things, but we don't really understand the deeper level, and we call them the alexithymic people. People who know they're feeling something, but they don't know what they're feeling. Okay, so how they come up with emotions is they know they're feeling something, and in Tamil they'll say, madri irukkunga. ஒரு மாதிரி இருக்குங்க, that's all. They don't know what it is. It's just a collection of the exactly, and they connect to the physiological part, but they don't want the subjective or the expressive part. They're just feeling it, and then they master few crude expressions. So these are the types that will fly off the handle for everything. For everything they get angry. I'm feeling sad, I'll feel angry. I'll express anger. I feel, and these are the ones that go into emotional eating as well. I don't know what I'm feeling, so I'll eat. I'm feeling an emptiness, so I'll eat. So the alexithymic people are the more, the ones that populate the earth more than the ones who are more emotionally
Then how do
aware.
we help?
Exactly.
How do we get help?
So that's exactly what it is, and that's where I'd like for us to understand. Even things like toxic positivity come because people are alexithymic. Because we've told them you're not supposed to feel these things. Feel happy all the time. And these are the ones that go on to Instagram and post only happy pictures. Perfect vacation. Photoshopped perfection.
Don't get me started on this highlights of my life on social media, which makes everyone believe that that's my life. It's a double trap. One, you're making other people depressed that this is the kind of life you are living every day, which is anyway a lie. And you're fooling yourself that your highlights are your life, is what your life is made up of.
Exactly.
And you're ignoring that there are ups and downs.
Internally, I'm not allowing myself to feel real. I'm not allowing myself to probably feel guilty. I'm not allowing myself to probably feel sad. I'm only going to say, I'm feeling something, so let me put one post. I'm feeling this, so let me do this.
#throwback holiday.
Exactly. But, when I see a lot of hashtags, I know that this person has shrunk everything to a couple of words. And I'd rather feel the whole deal. I'd rather feel the whole emotion.
That social media has helped while it has its negative sides. I think it has helped a lot in helping with the loneliness. Be more connected.
If you use anything well, see, any tool you use well can lead to your well-being, and any tool that you don't use well will lead to your dis-ease state. That's it. That's really how it's going to be. So toxic positivity as well is one of those things, because you don't know what you're feeling, you don't know what you're supposed to feel. So whenever you feel negative, you start shunning it, and you start covering it up sometimes with things that are not particularly great. So probably we should go into perspective. What do we do? So how do I become more aware? And that's very, very important. So there are a set of questions that we need to ask ourselves. The first question that I would always ask somebody, whenever you're feeling something, remember there's going to be a physiological part. So it's going to show up as, a tightness, it's going to show up as butterflies, it's going to show up as sweaty palms, it's going to show up as a lightness probably, or a heat or whatever. So become aware of it and say, what is this thing? What is it I'm feeling? Become aware, slow down, calm down. And many of these things that you can get when you slow down will not come when you're racing through life. Right? So you'll need to sort of actually take time and say, what is this repeated feeling I'm feeling? What is this repeated thing? So when I wake up in the morning, I'm always feeling this tightness. What is this repeated thing? Sit with it, because it always wants to tell you what it is. Of course, it's not going to get up and say, listen, I'm anxiety. It won't tell you that. You'll have to figure that out.
I'd probably fall off my bed and kind of pass out in fear.
I know. Listen, I'm anxiety. Okay, but in any case, what I'm trying to say is, you'll need to sort of go back on small incidents that happen. What is triggering this off? So when you sort of pick up the trigger, you'll sort of be able to pick up, oh, this is probably the emotion. And you'll never feel clear-cut emotions like, oh, I'm feeling angry today. There'll be anger with a little bit of guilt, a little bit of sadness, a little bit of something else. Depending on the event, there would be a combination. And these can be different for different people, depending on what the experience is. So once you identify those 2 or 3 emotions that you're feeling, the second, I would ask, what am I learning? Because that learning should never be sidelined, because that's where the gift is. So when I'm feeling sad, I'm learning that I'm capable of love. Love was genuine, and I'm giving it to you. When I'm feeling guilty, it's saying, I made a mistake and I'd like to make amends. Or when I'm feeling angry, I want to change this. So what am I learning is a very important aspect, and please don't rush through that question. Sit down, put the learnings, because in those learnings are the wisdom and the insights that we can lead life with. The third most important question, what would I like to do about it? So now I'm feeling these emotions. Do I want to stay with it? Do I want to change it? Because there are 2 ways. If I want to stay with it, sit with it very mindfully, allow it to pass. Because it has to go through. You'll have to go through it. And then once you've gone through it, so if it's sadness, cry through it. If it's joy, enjoy it. Be fully aware. Don't go and take photographs when you're feeling joyful. That's the worst way to kill joy. When you're feeling joyful, just be there. Like you were telling me about how you played in the rain, You should probably tell people how you played in the rain. That's important.
See, it's a very simple thing. I believe that the joy comes in from very small things, right? It's not like some huge event that is going to give you joy. The small things can give you incredible joy. I remember sitting here not more than 2-3 days ago. When I was sitting in my living room, I heard the noise of the rain hitting the cement, right? And immediately it took me back to my childhood, when I used to ask my mother and say, Amma, it's raining, can I go outside and play? And my mother would have this tired look, go, and she'll send me out. So whenever it rains, this little kid is outside playing in the rain. So immediately I felt that nostalgia. I said, let me go out. And I said, oh, lockdown, what can I do? And he said, no, let me go to the terrace. So I went up to the terrace. I spent about 20 minutes in the terrace, just walking from one end to another. And I got wet in the rain, and the incredible joy that I felt. Of course, joy doesn't last very long. It's a very intense spurt of feeling that comes in, right? But that was so beautiful to experience. And something from as simple as, yes, we are under lockdown. Yes, I miss being out in the woods and in the forest and out in the open. But I can still experience and commune with nature by coming out here and looking at the tops of the trees and the birds. That joy was amazing. It was really amazing.
And in the core of that experience is the fact that you said joy is very short-lived. And when you stop to take photographs and videos of it, you sort of externalize it, and then it goes away. And then you want to relive it, and then you can't. And that's why I ask people, especially the current generation, please keep your cameras and all away sometimes. Just be in the moment. Stay with it. Stay with it, whether it's grief, love, whatever it is, just stay with it. Don't make it a photograph to remember. Because you will create joy in many ways. You don't need to go back to that joy from 15 years ago to be able to feel joyful now.
When you're so busy capturing the moment, A, you're not enjoying it. And B, you're also telling yourself that you're coming from a place of lack. I better capture it, because in the future I may not have it.
Exactly. Which is why I said stay with it. Stay with it. Whatever it is. And since there's no positive, negative, even sadness, it's short-lived. Provided I don't give it fodder to build, keep giving, material for it to, sort of hang on to. And so, if you want to stay with it, stay mindfully so that it passes. And if you want to change it, then that's the next step. The next step is very important. If you decide to change an emotion, I don't want to feel guilty, I don't want to feel angry, I don't want to feel this. I need to ask the next most important question, what would I like to feel instead? Because if I don't know where I want to go, I'm just going to be stuck in that emotion and find something that I don't want to feel. I don't want to feel angry, so I'll go and feel sad, very happy. It's like the saddest thing, right? Exactly. I'm feeling anxious, so I'll go and feel angry now. So I'm going to create more complications. So I need to know where I need to go, or the direction. So if I'm feeling angry, what would I like to feel more right now? I'd like to feel more strong, or I'd like to feel more assertive and communicative. I'd like to feel more understood. It can be something from there. Or when I'm feeling very, very angry, I want to feel more empathetic to the other person. So you need to know what you want to feel. Now, once you identify what you want to feel, try and have at least 2 emotions that you'd like to feel, because It has transitioned beautifully. You can't just suddenly say, oh, okay, I'll feel angry now, next moment I'll feel happy. No, it's not going to happen. You'll have to beautifully transition it. So you say, okay, I'm feeling angry, I'd like to first feel compassion, and then I'd like to feel this. So you'll have to have the transition and the actual emotion. And once you get that, most important, generate 6 steps. 6 steps consciously, not subconsciously. Consciously saying, okay, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. Why 6 steps? Because not all 6 will work. Out of those 6 that you generate, 2 or 3 will work. Make sure, like I said earlier, 1 or 2 must be physiological. Meaning it could be drinking some water, breathing in and breathing out. It can be any of these physiological. Go for a walk, have a physiological component first. The second, have a thought-related change. What would I like to be thinking instead of this? Remember the thought distortions I talked about, overgeneralization, it always happens to me, I'm a failure. So look, are you having any of those distortions? Then change that. That's very important. So when I know that I'm overgeneralizing here, or I'm expecting people to value my sacrifice, or people should be fair, or people should change, then that's what I need to change. And the most important, the last 2, the actual action steps. So if I want to feel joyful right now, I'm going to switch off all social media for the next 2 hours. And I'm going to read a book. I'm going to listen to music. I'm going to play with my dog. I'm going to do this. So I have to actually decide what to do and engage in that consciously. When I generate that, regulating emotion becomes a natural process, because what happens, the brain is neuroplastic. It starts picking up patterns. It says you were doing this, then you were doing this, and then you were feeling this earlier. Now you're saying this, then you're feeling this, then you're wanting to change this way, and then you're taking action like this. I think this pathway is better. And it's like walking through a forest. Heavily wooded area, when you're walking through the first time, you need to create the path. After a point, the path is created for you. And that's how emotions get regulated. So when I talk about emotional regulation, impulses will always come. But when you deal with the impulses with awareness, knowing exactly where you are, what you're feeling and what you'd like to feel, or whether you want to stay, then it becomes easier. And it takes time. And this is what I would share with the whole group, because as we've been keeping it real through 6 episodes, we've talked about emotions, and if you noticed, every episode had a huge chunk of emotions. I think the best way to finish the series was with the gift of emotions. So I sort of put that together, and probably you could sort of summarize.
What I truly enjoyed, and I'm sure people would also kind of relate to what I'm saying, it is trying to accept, first of all, that we have these thought distortions which are making us decide that this is an emotion worthy of highlighting, this is an emotion which needs to be hidden. So I think that was the first great insight that I got when we went through this episode, and I loved it. But what I loved the most was the ability to break down each emotion and say this has a purpose. When we opened the episode, I said emotion has a purpose. Then if we ignore it, then we are not maximizing the potential of that purpose, right? And we both said, oh wow, that is so true. It helps me break those thought perceptions, those thought distortions, and say that look at it this way. And I think that is what gives me the ability to believe in what you said, that there are no negative emotions.
Because every honest emotion is a positive emotion.
Beautifully said. Absolutely. And I can't say anything better than that. So I hope you all really could relate to what we spoke in this episode. This is the last of the series Keeping It Real, but the last of the series 1. So we hope to be able to come back with more content, but for now I want to thank you on behalf of Aarti and me. We really enjoyed this whole process. We were so happy to be able to share real insights, our real learnings, and we hope that you liked it as well.
I think the most beautiful journey here is that as Anu and I were creating the content and putting things together, we grew as people as well. There was a lot of healing that happened for us as well. So thank you all for making that possible, because I think we all live in this interdependent space where we're all helping each other. So I'm so happy painfully introverted, I would never say something like this, but it was really nice to have you all in this journey with us. Normally, I would avoid all of you, but this was a beautiful opportunity for me to work through my remoteness by reaching out. So, thank you, Anu, for helping me do that.
Oh,
because
thank
it was
you,
very,
Aarti.
very enriching for me to reach out. Thank you so much, all
Yeah.
of you, and I've learned to say bye as well.
Yeah, she's learned to say bye. Bye, everyone. We'll see you soon.